Okay, so let me start you with a shocking fact. Are you ready?
Okay.
I think I've watched this movie more than any other Soderbergh film.
Get
I
out
do.
of
I
town.
know.
Ocean's 11?
Yes, I think I've seen this more than Ocean's 11. Like I've seen this
Get
movie, I want
right
to
out of
say
town.
10 times, 15 times.
I
Um,
believe you because I know what type of films you like, and I this is a good one.
yeah,
This is a
well,
fucking good
it's good, but
one.
like nobody remembers it. And I feel like nobody saw it either. Like it kind
hmm
of just showed up and like
It did sneak
disappeared.
by. Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
wasn't it the same year as that other one we talked about that you hate so much? Full Frontal? Isn't it like the same year?
I don't know. Is Full Frontal 2002?
Yeah, it
Then
was.
yes, it
Can you
is.
believe that shit? It's the same year
That's the
as.
same year. Completely different movies.
Yeah, man. This guy's. I mean, you know how much I love Soderbergh. You
hmm
know, which is why it's funny that you're taking on a Soderbergh project this month because
Well,
that's not.
full
He's not your guy
disclosure.
usually. Okay, full disclosure. I'm ready.
Actually, I do like him, but
Okay. All right.
full disclosure, I just
Yeah.
didn't like Full Frontal.
Well, of course, understandable. Sure.
This is a first for Small Beans. We
Ooh.
so someone approached us. We'll call him Tom D because that's his name. And he approached us and he wanted to do a frame rate. And I don't know if you're familiar with our Patreon, but if you
I am.
pay us
actually.
enough, you can get Michael and I to talk about on our frame rate podcast any movie that you're like, I want you to cover this movie. And we do that. We usually only do one a month or so because, like we want to choose some frame rates
Right.
ourselves.
Right.
But he approached us and he was like trying to get the frame rate. And then what happened is someone else jumped ahead of him in line and got it. I don't jump ahead of line. It's not like, they're just like probably literally 15 minutes before he got it. And I
Bad
felt
luck.
that.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Tom was like, you know what I want? I still want you to cover the movie Solaris, 2002, with George Clooney, directed by Steven Soderbergh.
Fascinating.
Because I really like the story behind it, the book especially.
Oh,
And I was like,
he's a
dude,
book
that
guy.
movie,
Okay.
that movie fucking rips, and I love the Tarkovsky version
Yep.
and all that stuff.
Yep.
That I was like, let's do it. And he wanted to hear your thoughts on it as well, Adam. So for the first time ever, Directorpiece Theater is doing a Pick the Flick.
Oh, that's cool.
Shout out to Tom D. He chose this movie, but it was definitely under my, I really wanted to cover this as well. So
Great.
I think it's a
didn't
great
even
choice.
Know that. Yeah, I didn't even know that.
I'm
that's cool.
updating you all.
That's cool.
So
I
that's
mean,
what this is.
I'm
Thank you, Tom
always-
D.
Yeah, thanks, Tom D. I'm always down to do the Pick the Flick stuff anyway.
Mhm.
I know that they don't usually vote on my time, but if somebody is really passionate to hear my thoughts on a film, just I'm throwing that out there. I guess for you. I guess for you.
Well, I mean, that's
guess
what
so you
this
can know that.
is. He wanted this conversation.
I appreciate that he wants that. Hopefully, we satisfy him. Hopefully, he is satisfied. Anyway,
and that's the episode, everybody.
Yeah. So, funny enough, like I've watched this movie. I've actually owned this movie 3 different times.
Okay.
Like I bought the DVD of it right when it came out, when you could. And then I loaned it to a friend who I was like, dude, you got to see, you're a sci-fi fan, you're going to love this. And then I never got it back. And just, that's happened a few times. It's sort of like the Sublime CD of movies for me. Because that's another thing. I kept buying that Sublime
you gotta
CD.
check out this band Sublime, dude.
No, in 98 when the lead singer died and they had that self-release or that self-titled record, that record was everywhere and got stolen. I don't know how many times because I was living in the OC when that came out, so that was its.
I had that record.
Yeah, that was its nexus where everybody wanted it so bad and it was being stolen. Anyway, yeah, Solaris, the follow-up to Traffic.
It really gets you going.
Well, actually, so this is after Ocean's 11, right? So he made Ocean's 11 after Traffic, and then he made this movie.
2001 and
God,
2002, yeah.
What a run.
Soderbergh is amazing.
Yeah.
Just you can't pin this on me. I'm not anything. I'm everything, baby.
Yeah, he's he definitely defies categorization. He's kind of a Sidney Lumet type.
Yeah, a little bit.
Even
more so because he's made Contagion and shit. He's all over the place.
Right.
What Sidney Lumet's Contagion? I don't know what that.
Well,
was.
he did Failsafe, and then and he's done stuff like he did 12 Angry Men,
That's
which
true.
is pretty different, and then he did Before the Devil Knows You're Dead.
But
that movie's crazy.
Soderbergh's like done what I would call legitimate blockbusters.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So
yeah, you're right. There's no Sidney Lumet. There's no Sidney Lumet Godzilla.
You know, Adam, and we also haven't introduced ourselves.
Oh, sorry.
Adam, as Abe. See,
as the Abe of this podcast,
I would like to know. You just said in like kind of off the cuff that you were like sci-fi. Yeah. I always have thought that you're not a big sci-fi guy.
I think I'm a less sci-fi guy than our friends who are super sci-fi guys.
That's fair.
Like
we have some super sci-fi friends.
Yeah, like I really like Alex Garland. He's the kind and amount of sci-fi I get excited by. Same here. I think this is, but actually this movie was recommended to me by a person who's a hard sci-fi guy. So I guess I'm a person who's been led to sci-fi by people who are more passionate about it. Like that's my stance on it in general.
Yeah. Okay, that's fair.
Yeah.
I like that because I think that's in the same vein of like when you think about hard sci-fi and like Star Trek and stuff like that. It's not about the warp engines. It's about the, complex political kind of topics that they discuss.
It's like a thought experiment. Yeah, Star Trek's like a thought experiment every episode.
Yeah, you definitely get that, and I think that our Alex Garland is another good reference. Like people who understand that about sci-fi, it usually makes it better. I think this is definitely one of them. At least the main story is such a simplistic, cool, designed premise that it's just like endlessly fruitful for discussion. And I think that that's what we're going to do today is going to be a little bit more of conversational. I do want to point out up top what exactly makes how Soderbergh approached this and what makes it a unique vision. But then I really want the second half of this just to be me and you just discussing the overall kind of thematic and
the meaning.
Philosophical repercussions of a story like this and the decisions we make. And so hopefully, Tom, you enjoy that. But let's start because there's a lot to cover, I think, and I want to get through some of this quickly. And first off, we should discuss, just so everyone knows if you haven't seen or what that story is. This is Solaris. It's Tarkovsky was a guy who made in 1972 a film of the same name. Very famous, like kind of auteur director from Russia. There was a made-for-TV movie like 4 years before that, but it's also mainly a book from the early 60s. But they all deal with a planet called Solaris that our main character travels to. And he's usually, I think he's 100% a psychologist that is arriving at a research station set up nearby Solaris in orbit. And he's kind of assessing a crew because the crew is kind of trying to attempt to understand an extraterrestrial intelligence there, which actually takes the form of a vast ocean. So that's first off, that's cool concept in sci-fi. But after Earth loses contact with all the previous teams, it appears that the danger is psychological in nature. So that's why they call this guy in. And the protagonist arrives and finds out fairly quickly that the planet is reading the crew's dreams and just manifesting a person out of thin air. This person always seems to have a deep connection to the crew member, either a loved one, one of their children, even themselves. The clones have memories of their life and communicate with the members of the crew when they appear. Though, as we find out through the story, they start to realize that there are holes because it's like a virtual version of someone's memory of them. So they're not fully realized as people. They are, however, immortal, which causes some problems because they resurrect even if they like drink liquid oxygen. In the Soderbergh version, Dr. Kelvin, who's played by George Clooney, starts off just by throwing his dead wife out of an airlock because Rhea, his ex-wife who committed suicide, is now there, and he's like, "Fuck this," which is kind of. That's kind of real. I'm not gonna lie.
I loved it. I love that
big offer in Act 1. Yeah, just Act 1. Just like, yep, nope, gone. But the backstory here that's relative for you to understand, or kind of our discussions, is that Rhea, after she terminated a pregnancy years ago, which we find in like Act 2, all this information out, killed herself. And then one night when Kelvin Clooney found out, he walked out on her, and she was left alone. And that's when she committed suicide. He came back and found her, and he's been living largely in grief his whole life since.
It's been 10 years, fresh. Right?
It's been like 10 years, yeah. So largely, the film's Act 2 examines Kelvin's gradual openness to this like Rhea clone, her existence, and simultaneously, it also looks at the other crew members of Solaris. There's like 2 other ones, who Snow and Gordon in this case, who debate the methods and morality of just leaving Solaris because they're worried they'll bring it back to us, and it will cause some cascade effect with Earth. They invent at one point a device that bombards the clone with a form of energy, basically vaporizing them. But as Kelvin ponders bringing Rhea back to Earth, Gordon becomes his main opposition. She, who's played by Viola Davis, thinks
she's great.
Very good.
Yeah.
Because she's absolutely a scientist. She's like, I'm not going to bring this shit back to Earth. What the fuck are you thinking? You're getting too close to this, which I love.
She's emotional, but rational about her emotions.
She's like, yeah, don't you understand what's at stake? Yeah.
Right. And don't you understand what you don't know? I mean, and those are good questions, you know? Yeah.
Right. So she's there and she has that viewpoint. And in the end, kind of guilt-ridden, and like she's guilty because she feels she's got literal imposter syndrome. She feels inauthentic. Rhea kills herself using Gordon's help with the device. There's also a subplot where Snow, where it was the whole time is the clone. And he killed the OG Snow because OG Snow saw himself, and as you would assume, probably freaked out, and they just fought, and ultimately the clone won. So he's been kind of moonlighting as the OG Snow, because what else are you going to do? He's just literally popped into existence. As he describes, he's like, I knew nothing. The first thing I literally knew is myself coming at me with a knife. Which is kind of a cool...
It is cool. It's interesting that the purpose of that being continues whether the person you're visiting exists or not. Yeah. So
it's like a download. It's not like a persistent.
That calls into question whether the intelligence of Solaris is actually doing this to interact with the people or not.
We'll get into.
Yeah, I know we will. I'm just pointing that out now. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good indication of the story really wanting us to think about that, which it does.
Yeah, it definitely does.
I would argue.
Yeah.
So Kelvin and Gordon get into the ship after they kind of just say, Snow, you stick around. There's a little, logic as to why they need to leave and leave now, but that's not really important to any of the stories. It's not to the philosophical. You kind of got the gist. Point is, they go on a ship to get home, but Kelvin feels the presence of Rhea again while she's now on the planet, apparently, so she didn't die. And he decides to stay, whether he dies or not. And we're kind of revealed by that we see him go back home, and then he cuts his finger, and then the finger heals, which is a property of the clones. They can have healing properties. So then he knows, I'm not on our Earth. I'm on Solaris. And then she reveals herself, says, yep, you're right. You are on Solaris.
We don't have to think about that anymore.
Yeah, Kelvin. So basically Clooney decides whether, I'm just going to die. I'm going to stay. And they spend eternity on Solaris as echoes of memories, I guess.
It's not clear what their existence is at the end of the day.
Right. Nor is it important. All we have to know is that there's this god alien that can do things whether they want to or not, which is probably going to be the topic of our conversation.
I'm guessing that's why I was asked to be here. I'm sure that's what it is. I think
it's going to be interesting. In that I do want to say how Soderbergh, and I'm sure this is just nice because we're going to be on common ground probably.
Yeah.
I want to talk about what Soderbergh did that's really effective in making you understand, like, how do you cover a movie that your protagonist is like kind of, memories are so key to the story. Memories are so from where everything spawns, yet they're unreliable. In the case of like Rhea, she's having memories that are his, so she's not a full person. And then on the other instance, you have Clooney, who's like, I'm not sure exactly what I remember, and is what I remember the true version of that person. There's a lot going on. And one of the cool aspects, if not the coolest aspect of this movie, is how we start on Earth, how we show Clooney in his like state of being before we get to Solaris.
Yeah.
The movie opens, he's getting out of bed, he's walking on the street to go to work, making food, taking a train. Everything is transitional. In other words, he's filming liminal spaces. And the editing is very abrupt, it's very stark, and it's indicative of a kind of ongoing process, which is of course how like what we think of when we think of a montage. That's just the items of a montage. So it feels like a montage. The whole movie in a way does.
Yep.
There's no music. It's not like a classic montage. And this is just something I wanted to point out, like Rocky running up the steps, getting stronger, you know, like that shit. That's what you think when I say word montage, right?
Yes. Rocky's the best at montages. Absolutely. Yeah.
When we think of the word montage, we think of that Rocky thing.
Yeah.
Like what montage really is, when you look back at like the history of the word, like and how it was used in movies, is colloquially, it's just a sequence in a movie that cuts in a way that advances time quickly. It's a series of images that we're supposed to believe like doesn't play in real time, and it's it could even be in the mind of the character. We've seen montages that are, dream sequences and stuff like that, but that's what we think of when we think montage. Usually it's set to music or has like some kind of consistent, like a narration or something.
Yeah, that kind of lubricates it so that it feels more natural.
But the origin of the word and why that is becoming the kind of colloquial understanding of the word is because the origin of the word really means only the itemized thing that makes up that sequence. It means context between cuts. That's what word montage really actually means, at least historically.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is like if I show you a man with sad eyes and then cut to, let's say, a warm home-cooked meal, you might infer that he's hungry, right?
Yeah.
Or if I took the same shot of that same sad man and cut to his lover, then you think that and the lover's sad. Maybe you think that their relationship is in trouble. It's the basically it's the like in between the cut that is the suspension of our disbelief that makes for a combined image that helps you, the viewer, understand what the movie's going for.
Okay.
That's what, and this was all like, this is Eisenstein. This is the like,
this is the very beginning. Yeah.
Very beginning. He literally made a movie that was just like, I'm going to take a shot of a man looking blankly at camera and then just cut in stuff and like ask people, what did you think that was about? And it's because he was trying to understand what is like early days in cinema. What is the suspension of disbelief? What is it the same for everybody? Does everyone watch a movie and like is able to connect the tissue? Turns out yes, and that's why we have movies. But yeah, montage that's like kind of the origin of where we started with montage, and now we kind of have just kind of, not in a bad way, we've called it. It's still in the spirit of the word. But when you think of, Rocky running up the steps or whatnot,
yeah,
that's a different kind of montage.
There's a way we do it. There's a way it's normally done. Which
so anyway,
is the grammar of it. Yeah.
The reason I even mention that is that like it does feel like a classic, or it does feel like a colloquial montage, these sequences. But I think that there's something going on here with like the conversation. What's his purpose in being there? Don't you love me anymore?
Yeah, right.
These are questions that aren't really montage questions. These are scene work questions. So he's blending the line of what's a scene, what's reality, what's temporally consistent, and with what's memory. And that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's right. If you really wanted to, you could say none of this happened. Or all of it is remembered later after his decision to stay on the station.
Right. And that's really what Soderbergh, that's his involvement. If you go back and watch the Tarkovsky version, the liminal spaces stuff is not in there. It's more about him and his father and stuff, and about the character novella that's occurring.
So it plays more in real time, like meaning it never asks the question whether what you're watching is happening or not.
No, it does.
Okay.
It's just, it's not about the first image and the first sequence. Like, it's not like how the movie jumps. And I think, personally, and I think you probably share this opinion, first images or first sequences in movies are super important in elaborating theme, right?
That's a film school basic. Absolutely.
Right. And in this movie, he's in group therapy as a psychologist, clinical psychologist, and he listens to 2 points of view. And we hear 2 different points of view being espoused. And this is...
That's right.
Soderbergh's fucking nailing it here. First person we hear is a man who's bothered that any small random thing, like a news story or a t-shirt hanging in a window, puts his wife into a laconic state. And then her laconic, because it reminds her of something, a previous trauma. And then he is like, then her being in that way causes me to be in a laconic state. So like I'm basic, like I think it's like, it seems like a dead kid is what.
Yeah, there's
like,
a trauma.
He doesn't say
right.
it, but it's some kind of thing like
right.
that. And then a woman argues that she says seeing reminders in the real world don't make me feel anything. They feel hollow. They feel like they're not connected to me. And that scares me. And so we have 2 different point of views, 2 contrasts of one basic principle. The concept of being overwhelmed by perception, whether by not having enough emotional connection to it or having too much. Someone overwhelmed by a disconnect between her reality and emotion, and someone just overwhelmed by looking at anything, by perception itself. That's really the heart of this film. And it really asks the question that we're going to kind of talk about later, is what's the result of perception's stranglehold on our reality?
Oh, we're going all the way to that, huh?
We'll get there.
All right.
This is kind of echoed later in the movie by a statement made by Dr. Gabarian, which is, we don't want other worlds. We want mirrors.
That's right.
More on that later.
There's another line in there either. It's like, there's no answers, only choices.
Mm-hmm.
There's another, that line I paid attention to this time. Yeah, keep going.
One last thing. It's just kind of more on the montage bit. I did want to, he's doing more than meets the eye there too. I wanted to mention it earlier just because it's like, if there is a liminal space in film, it is the space in between the cuts. You know what I mean? Like the thing that we're filling in the detail. But anyway, to really address it, when you look at people like Chris Nolan, Alex Garland, Greta Gerwig, and Soderbergh to some extent, he paved kind of the way. If you look, his early films, they predated any of those other 3 names I mentioned. They all use short, quick edits between scenes, like abrupt square cuts. And there's this tendency that we don't last in a scene very long. And in fact, most of this film is a flashback. When you look at it in terms of like the scene by scene by scene, definitely Act 2 is almost entirely flashback with comments, and we pop back. It's this idea that it's like, okay, there's a long scene in montage, then we just cut it up by popping back to a shot of them actually on the ship and he just asking a question, and then we're back in the montage. It's this idea that we're traveling between the 2. Films where protagonists kind of go through mental strain, either they have like affecting dreams or reality is questioned. I find that these films often play with this relationship, and Soderbergh is no real different. Later in the film, when Clooney kind of starts to get a handle on his dreams and reality, and they're becoming mixed, and he's also taking pills. I don't know what for. It could be for radiation, but I'm not sure.
The pills are a little unclear. Yeah. A
little unclear, but he's taking pills, which is kind of, to me, just a kind of dog whistle for, like, oh, something is not, his reality isn't exactly clear.
Just briefly, because this will matter later, the blue pill seems to be an antidepressant of some kind, and the red one seems to make him stay awake.
Yeah. And during these segments, Rhea will appear in different places in what appears to be diegetic reality. And what I mean by that is she'll be standing, and then he'll answer her question, and then it'll cut to her sitting, and it's like no time has passed.
It's like they both happened or none of them happened. Right.
Yeah, exactly. So it's memories takeover of reality. Once again, the liminal taking over our home world.
Yeah.
Reality.
He does cuts in this that you'd never see in movies. Like even today, like he'll do a cut where like he'll cut from like a close up of a face to like a slightly off the eye line looking above them.
Yeah.
Like medium close of the same face.
It's like haunting in a way.
It's like haunting, and it's like that would be a horrible cut in any other movie, but in this movie it has meaning because again, he is making us operate in that in between the cut space. That's a great point.
And proof is in the execution, like you're saying with the eye lines. He does that with asynchronous sound to illustrate memories. Like for example, this means overlapping audio that doesn't belong to the video. Like when you have synced sound, it's I open my mouth on video and it's all the words look exactly right. It looks like a normal person. He refuses to do that. He'll do non-diegetic sound sometimes, overlapping audio that just doesn't belong in this space, which is a thing that happens in montage over and over in other films. So it's not a big deal on its own, but when it's taken from another speech at a different time in a different place, playing over the scene, it's different from basic voiceover.
Right.
Like, for example, the one that I just thought of was basically just like someone commenting on something else that's happening. Like in Game of Thrones, this is used a lot. There's a speech that Littlefinger gives at one point that's pretty popular, famous. That's like chaos is a ladder.
Chaos is a ladder.
And then the video of it is ping-ponging around the world to show how these things are coming to a head. And yeah, it is chaos.
Right.
That's fairly popular, especially recently. Especially films of the directors that I mentioned. TV has really, done this a lot more recently than, other things that it could have picked up from its history of cinema or TV. But in Solaris's case, we're supposed to believe that Rhea is having a disconnect between her memory of events, those that are unseen, and seen events as remembered by Clooney. So it's this kind of joint memory that happens, or not joint memory in that they're coming to a compromise, but joint is in they're kind of filling each other. They're filling in details, and the movie itself is kind of us watching like, okay, filled in, she said that, but that was like OG her, was OG her, but Clooney's memory of her, and now this is her actually responding to that memory. It's like a game of telephone, right?
I mean, yes, except for I have to say one thing that makes Soderbergh so great is that he does do little touches to keep us grounded enough to follow it narratively. Like, for instance, we were talking about this before we started recording. He has like a little filter that he puts in front of the camera for planet Earth and like a color scheme, like a warmer color scheme. But the filter makes it so that it's slightly tinted at the top, like third of the frame. If you look for it, you'll never unsee it. So sorry for those of you who are going to watch this and never unsee it.
It also kind of has a vignette.
Yeah, it's a vignetting effect, right? But it does this thing where it sort of unconsciously, where you are. Like, you're on Earth, right? Like he does like these little things to distinguish where and when we are that help us know. Like there's a montage like this when George Clooney is sleeping that explains both the emotional cause of and the fact of Rhea's arrival as a visitor, where we get the backstory of them meeting, and then we get the sort of confusion of her being there and him being confused about it. And then we actually get him waking up, and we know that both things were setting us up for the real thing that's happening, which is now she's actually here.
Right.
Soderbergh's very good at grammatically keeping us grounded so that he can do this shit. It's hard to do this. Yeah. It's very hard to do this, I would say.
I love the subliminal kind of suggestion of the filter and Earth. I didn't even think of that, and that's totally in thematic tone.
I think that's the only reason it's there. You know what I mean? It's themes and for clarity. Like otherwise, it's not really a very meaningful choice.
Then like, what is this? Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So basically, all of this is an effort to really give you the sense out of these sequences that you're unsure of who is truly narrating the movie, Rhea the clone or Rhea the memory.
Yeah.
I think.
Okay.
And I think that's, if you look at the Tarkovsky, if you read the, I haven't read it, but I did some critical reading and I read a pretty detailed synopsis of the Stanislas Lem, who's the writer.
Who wants the philosophy more than the emotions.
And all of them they want us to ask this question. So let's go back to the top where I said the thing that we're going to talk about later, the very important thing. What's perception versus reality?
Right.
That's what I want to ask you a question. Let's start our conversation.
Okay.
if you knew, for example, that the world was like a copy, right? Like a perfect
Like
copy.
there was a world that's real and this isn't it.
And I'm not saying this version,
Yeah.
but like the Matrix. Right?
Okay.
Do you think it ever would be real enough if you knew?
Like once I know this isn't real, can anything undo that parlor trick?
Yeah.
No. I don't think so. Like in the sense that to make me accept and be completely driven by the things that go on in this reality, I don't think so.
So it would at least kind of deconstruct and destroy the realness of it for you.
It would undermine the meaning of its realness, even if it didn't deconstruct its realness, right? So, like, what I mean by that is, so, like, in The Matrix, imagine a world where you woke up and saw the towers, right? And knew definitively that what you saw was real, and then you went back to sleep and were never able to see the towers again, right? But you knew that happened, and you can't get to the surface of what it means. Would you still be obsessed with getting ahead as a banker? You know what I mean?
Right.
Would you still like desperately seek your partner, like finding a partner in this reality?
That is a good answer. Now I just want to ask this question.
Go for it. Sure.
Because what do you think about living with doubt though?
I mean, we all have to.
Yeah. But specifically on this topic, for example, I know something that you might have an interesting answer or a different answer than me is powerlessness to something comforting ever? For example, like let's say God.
Okay.
Is powerless to God comforting? Would not knowing what God let's just say
if God is inscrutable, right? Like, so if I assume that God is inscrutable, then no, it'd be terrifying, right?
Okay, so so it's terrifying if God is inscrutable. If you don't understand,
correct? Which is the premise of this movie.
So not knowing what God wants changes things for you.
If God is an ocean of consciousness whose motives are entirely alien, the way
it's not God.
This
has nothing to do with God.
Yeah. Well, no, that could be God. That could be what God was. I mean, I don't think that's the rational explanation for what God would be. But let's suppose a world where that is true. Then no, knowing that you're powerless to that being would not be a good feeling. Like, you would not feel comforted by it.
You wouldn't feel comforted because you'd have that doubt.
Not doubt. You would have certainty. You would have certainty that you couldn't know. And like, so you wouldn't doubt that, you know what I mean? Like, that's the thing, is it wouldn't be a doubtful experience, because doubt means there's a possibility that it could go one of several ways.
I guess doubt that it's got your back.
Oh, you would know that it doesn't have your back. Like, I think you do. If you're George Clooney, for instance, in this movie, right? He does what every human being would do when in the face of a God he doesn't understand. He tries to reason out what is the God like based on what it's doing, right? And the logic he comes to is it could have killed us if it wanted to, right? And so it didn't.
That is a compelling argument.
It is a compelling. I agree.
Not knowing what it wants gives this feeling of, then what does it want is the question.
Well, and I think
to the front, right?
That's what Viola Davis's character is obsessed with. Is trying to figure out what is it real. I think, like, in some sense, she's the true religious person. Like, what? That's
interesting.
George Clooney is not a religious person. George Clooney is using the God for his own pleasure. Like it's a genie. But the second it betrays him, his belief in that God would be shattered. That's just like human experience.
I think they're all faith. They all have faith in something.
Absolutely.
And I think that the person who truly examines it, distant from kind of their own perception, or the closest we get, I wouldn't say is flawed or flawless, is Dr. Gabarian. Because he asks those questions that you referenced the quote to, which is a series of 3 lines. Why do you think Solaris wants something? He asks.
Why does it have to want something? Right.
And then the response is he keeps saying, if you keep thinking there's a solution, you'll die here.
Right.
There are no answers, only choices.
But I would argue that appearance is actually in the same way that everything is a manifestation of a person's consciousness in this movie. That is a manifestation of George Clooney's beliefs that he's held his whole life. Right? Because remember they have that whole...
I think they're all scientists.
Yeah, he's a scientist, but he's also kind of a smug dick. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like he's sort of both things. And I don't mean that in a pejorative way. I mean, like, there's a really great scene where he talks
the dinner party?
Yeah, he talks his wife into coming to this dinner party. And it's very clear she has these beliefs in God. Like, she believes in God. Mm-hmm. And he thinks they're very stupid. Like they're stupid and they're obviously not informed, and he's pretty condescending about it. Him and, by the way, the guy who appears to him later, they're both there. And she, at a certain point, no longer hears him because she's realizing she's only seeing it from his point of view, which is what the point of that scene is. But but also I think there's a reason why Soderbergh cuts the sound out there, because it helps us.
There's memory error.
It's partly that. Found. It's partly that. You're absolutely right. But it's also to take the stock of who he is at that moment, not what he's saying.
Yeah,
who he is. Right.
It's accosting. It's an effective silence while looking at someone's face,
him,
knowing that they're angry or that they have a lot going on in their brain.
Right.
Is a very compelling image.
Absolutely. And like, again, contrast this. Like, there's a reason why that guy shows up there. Because it allows him to not address the morality of what he's doing, right? Like that belief system reinforces for him, like, I don't have to think about what I'm doing. I'm allowed to chase this feeling I have because there is no answer. There's only choices. A thing that literally everything in front of him is telling is not true. Right? Like everything in front of him tells him it's not true. You know, this place is riddled with answers. Whether he may not have the ability to perceive them, but they're there. Like, he has proof they're there every day. Right?
Yeah.
Whether they're accessible is the question, right?
Yes.
Well, and here's the kicker part, right? So there's obviously the last meaningful image of him on the spaceship is assisting chapel recreation, where he is being reached out to by this child who's been running around the ship without seemingly without a cause, and it's very clearly like a manifestation of the planet's consciousness, I would say. Like the child is the planet, like the child is God, exploring this place and just sort of running rampant.
That was my interpretation.
That was not
I could see
okay.
Symbolically,
I'm ready.
I literally thought it was Garbarian's, or however you say his name, Dr. Garbarian's,
his kid that died.
His kid, who's just now lingering, showing that memories persist, which is
That's interesting.
There's a whole point.
Does it say that it...
That's what I think is the Soderbergh version. What you're pitching is actually the Tarkovsky version.
It feels like
to me, or that's the They're both... I think that's fine. I think that Tarkovsky is a lot more spiritual than Soderbergh.
I think Soderbergh...
And he shows it as in more of a sympathetic light, the faith aspect of this. But Soderbergh definitely does present it. I mean, he says that like memories and love breathe life into things, and more concretely, the artificialities of memory are no less real than what is real, which is consistent with what I think
he might be saying that.
Espoused in
I
think he is.
I think he's sort of choosing to defer a little bit on that question. I don't think he's making a really strong statement about it.
Well,
but he's clearly,
I guess maybe
invoking the God imagery with this child.
And it's also exactly the thing that you and I are having a little bit of a problem with our not in a bad way, but like just like we are not my perception and your perception is a little different. I actually think Soderbergh is more like me. You think he's more like you,
I don't think he's like me at all, actually. I think he
because I was gonna say
believes things that you do too.
He puts it like a scientist. He's like preaching debate somewhat. Like he's like, if you had a Solaris like deal, it's preferable to grief sometimes, which is
Yeah.
kind of not how anyone would want faith to be described back at them. Like it's a pill, a form of opiate that calms the
he definitely is
masses.
saying
That's not
that.
very flattering.
He's definitely saying that.
I think he is.
Yeah, like there's a reason why Rhea is dressed in the same color as the blue pill at the end.
Right. Yeah.
Like because it's a sedative, like
Yeah.
it's he is saying that that this sort of eternity of religion is an eternity of echoes, and sort of an eternity of one feeling and one perception. And I think that's how anybody who doesn't believe in religion would view it. I think that makes a lot of sense,
Mhm.
but I think he's also actually stumbling onto some things that are more meaningful, and sort of he's kind of saying the opposite at the same time.
I think you have to have sympathy for the other part of the equation, because there's a balance that's happening.
Totally.
If you don't know something,
Totally.
if you do have that question, that means there's two competing claims that have equal value to you at that point. And I think it's a fair assumption that the whole movie, especially Act 2, is the reversal of George Clooney's previous assumptions to the assumption of something larger, to the idea of Solaris being a viable way to live life. He opens up to it gradually.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that's the meaning of this child, the god of the Sistine Chapel, actually connecting to his hand, because he's still kind of ambivalent and afraid of it in the way they shoot it. I mean, and again, it's very clear the Sistine Chapel. That's not an accident.
I think that for us, for more of a layman, for someone who's not of faith, the Sistine Chapel becomes less of a transmutation of God's will into man and more of a parable for creation, the birth of something, the touch, the spark. So I feel that like, as in my, heathen ways, I'm arguing that, like, I think Soderbergh is trying to say that the whole setup of that framing, the whole like allegory that he's doing there, which you're absolutely right, is mimicking that stuff, is more of a statement of memory and perception begets memory, and perception begets memory and perception. Here's the birth process of Solaris.
I think that,
which is different than to say that's how ideas occur, or
the birth process of Solaris. I'm just thinking about the words here.
It's how it perpetuates itself.
Okay, well, if it's helpful for the sake of conversation, I think actually those things might be they might be somewhat synonymous.
I think so. I think it's all how you prefer to kind of analyze it, but they're both saying the same.
So Christian eternity, right? This is drawing heavily on that. Christian eternity, if you study it, is clearly a recreation. Like that, like it's not people with harps in the clouds. It's a new heaven and a new earth, meaning a recreation. And there's a physicality. There's a restoration of what was into a better version of the new, right? And I think in that sense, that this eternity that's being promised or being activated, if you will, by him staying on the ship is a thin version of that, right? It's sort of like the movie itself. It's sort of an echo of that idea, right. Just like his memories are sort of echoes of what really happened. But as you said, he's not really on the side of, and then everything was great and the man lived in eternity in paradise forever. I think it's very much
right.
I think the ending is very much
bittersweet.
Bittersweet. Is this good? I don't know. Is this better?
I don't know, but I decided to stay. There's only choices.
Right. There's only choices. Right. This is the way that an existentialist would view
very
this
much so.
Eternity. And that's what's so great about it. There is a kind of romance to it, even if it's hollow ultimately.
Because something that I think really signifies the truth of, like, what makes the story so compelling, whether it be Soderbergh, Tarkovsky, or Lem, you can't deny the premise that perception at least feeds our reality,
No.
if it's not entirely. And we have all seen time and time again, oh, even from the smallest moment of like, I thought something else was happening in this room and it's not. You guys are all, everyone's happy. And I feel like now I'm the crazy person. We've had those
Sure.
moments to looking across the landscape of American politics right now and going like, can you believe it? Roe v. Wade, you know,
Yeah,
like
my
there's
God,
so
yeah.
many indications of like reality. This is not reality. That we are very, I think humans in general, and it's a truth across the board, are very tuned to the concept of what I thought was true. Yeah, I thought it'd be one way. It's another way. You know, like it's just like
you want it to be one way. Yeah.
And that's what's interesting to me is that like, so really that it nullifies your choices into any kind of
meaning
criterion that will answer it correctly. There's no correct. There's no right. There's only choices that you make that you feel are the best thing for you or for the people that you love.
Obviously, I can't accept all of that as true. And I think it's not even the best explanation for the way reality works. But
sure.
I will say that it is a natural conclusion from experience.
I would say that it unifies humans, at least in some kind of. We all share it, you know. So
yeah, this is shared. There's that's what's so interesting is when you talk about we all share it, and yet the basis for all existentialist abstraction is the impermutability of knowledge from one consciousness to another.
Yeah,
like how inscrutable my mind is from yours, no matter how. There is no possibility of true understanding or meaning between us.
Asymmetrical kind of insight. Yeah.
Well, that's the problem, right? It's like, but that kind of an idea is so rife with it kills all hunger. It doesn't satisfy on a base level why human beings communicate. Like, you know, and that idea, it's self-defeating.
Although the argument is that we might be animals or we might be beings that even if we know something is not, even if we doubt something very, very much so, even if we don't have a certainty of it, but we doubt it very much so that we will actually succeed in doing stuff, we still do it.
I think that the human need to be understood and to rationalize the universe is so powerful that even viewpoints like the one that you were describing Soderbergh as having, and I don't know the man, so I can't say for sure.
I don't even know, but it's just I'm looking
the way
at
we're
the
describing
film.
it. Yeah. The way we're describing it, even that viewpoint must, though it consumes its own tail, must find its own satisfaction because we need it too bad to let it lie. We need it too bad.
Well, if you look at the story, and as I said before, so in the comments, you know, rag on me. I did do like some reading on it. I'm not just like cliff notesing it. But Lem's argument is even less spiritual, I guess is a word that could be used. Grief is, he kind of leaves us with grief is permanent. There's no solution. Even if we want one, nothing is going to go well. You're not going to get any answers as to why, if you're even right at the end of the tunnel. And that's even darker than what I think Soderbergh is kind of positing. A life is a life, even if that life is a clone, even if that life feels like it's an incomplete version of a previous life, it is still something to live. I think that's what Soderbergh does have I don't know. I think Soderbergh does have that little hopefulness there.
Oh, I agree. It's bittersweet hopefulness. I totally agree.
Yeah. And Tarkovsky is more of like, sometimes God literally shows you the thing that you don't want to be true, that is true. I will give you the thing you need. That's more like Tarkovsky also has questions about the artificialities of like the reality, but he ultimately kind of comes down to the spiritual kind of like, it deals with the love of his father. He chooses his father over the Rhea character. and it kind of pans out for him. He is happy as we leave Solaris.
Mm.
Lem is not a big fan of that. And Soderbergh is kind of the middle. That's just my rundown of my different interpretations of the versions.
I think that the Soderbergh version and sort of encapsulating the dilemma in a lover that left too soon is a more. I think it speaks to modern audiences a little more than Tarkovsky's version would. For a few reasons.
Yeah.
The biggest one being that I think our search for meaning it can often feel like or even be like an experience of loving a woman like Rhea, like he had, right? Where there are moments of this sort of like, my God, it really seems like this is the way it's supposed to be, and then suddenly and seemingly without understanding it, it crumbles, and then what are you left with, right? Like suffering really does seem to eradicate a lot of people's beliefs in our time.
Yes, I
I
would argue entirely that right now we have kind of an addiction in story. If you look at the movies, for sure,
to suffering.
Well, the idea of having a chance to choose differently, to right previous wrongs.
Yeah. That's I think
that's what's originally that's repugnant to Clooney's character at the beginning, and then at the end he it's the soma, it's the balm to the wound.
Think that he does grow in a way that we can describe as spiritual, even from the framework you're saying. He grows to be willing to accept that he made a mistake and try to fix it, but also to sacrifice himself and his ideas for a reality in which he's happy, I guess.
In the same vein, I'm just gonna off the rip, would you prefer free will or fate?
If I have to choose between them. I don't know how anybody can say there is such a thing as free will. I don't even know what that really means. I think
a sidestep for the generation.
It's not a sidestep. I think that everyone has the experience of conscious choice. That experience of conscious choice is true. And you made your decisions because you made them. But sort of like the way that we're doing moral calculus now by diffuse impact. Like, for instance, as a consumer, often my morals are decided by, you bought that egg? Did you know that, Venezuelan cattle farmers were tortured for that egg? No, man, I didn't know that. You know what I mean?
You're eating torture.
Right. That's sort of, when we talk about free will versus fate, that is the actual dynamic at work, right? Where it's like, okay, on the one hand is my experience, and this is the realm I'm operating in, and
it's control.
All the things that actually determine that choice, if you want to extrapolate into the spider web of causality, are like, yeah, if that's how you do it, then there is no such thing as free will. Does that make sense to you?
Mm-hmm. So there's no such thing.
I don't know what that could even mean.
As free will. And it wouldn't be real enough if you knew the world is a copy.
But I also don't believe, Abe, that I'd be an existentialist if I wasn't a Christian. You know that. You know that existentialism is very romantic for me. Nihilism is also very romantic for me. So I love them. They're like mistresses that I flirt with from time to time. I don't know what anybody even means by free will, like on any scientific or philosophical level. I don't know what that means.
Right. But what does it really mean?
But I believe that our understanding of what fate is also limited by our perception. Like, that's as much an alien intelligence as Lem's version of Solaris. So I think the idea of fate or predetermination or whatever is also a kind of a meaningless dialogue.
Well, it is until you're a clone, baby. And then, for example, Rhea, there's a clear indication in several of these works that the Rhea character is remembered as self-destructive through the perception of Kelvin Clooney. That new version ends up committing suicide as well, twice.
But counterpoint, the only way we can have these discussions philosophically is by creating a thing that is a reduced version,
a
reduced version of us.
Because that's like, you have
that's right,
to.
You have to.
Because like
that's correct. And that's why, as an abstraction, it's not the most useful way to talk about reality. It's good as a test case, and it's good for like the question you asked, which is like, what do you prefer?
Right.
You're right. This is a good way to talk about that. But when people want to then say that's what life is like, I would say, no, you reduced reality to explain it and therefore didn't capture it. In the same way that, like, this is my objection to A Serious Man, a film I know you really like. A Serious Man, I've always had the objection that the filmmakers are trying to make the case that life is cruel and purposeless, right? And that's what a lot of people are like, that's life, man. And my argument is, no, that's a reduced life that a filmmaker created to illustrate a point that isn't true. And that's why it doesn't feel true. Like, you're going
to... What proof do you have?
What proof? I have the experience of joy and faith of millions. Why do you think
that's not...
That says the opposite.
But like, what makes you say that filmmaker didn't believe that is that telescopes to reality?
I'm sure they did.
Even
believe
if it is a facsimile.
I'm sure they did believe it. But I'm saying...
But you're saying I just don't buy that part.
I'm saying that I think that, like most people whose viewpoint is grim in this way, it's a concentration on certain aspects of life and completely ignoring others in order to make the case. It's reductionist enough to make it seem true, but it isn't.
That's true. That's politics, baby.
Absolutely. That's all we ever do.
That's all movies.
That's all we ever do. We just create shadow plays.
That's all we ever do. It's not just movies. Yeah. I mean, so when we ask ourselves what the interesting question is, and yes, you can say the fact that you create a facsimile to prove a suggestion means that you're
reducing reality meaningfully.
You're giving the ammunition to one side
a little bit. Yeah,
I understand that. But when you do ask yourself, would you prefer free will or fate? You immediately identified, which I think rightfully so, is that it's kind of just about control.
It's always about control.
It's about and if you are powerless, even if you believe that the person who does have the power or the entity that does have the power has your back, you still find yourself in a situation where you will doubt that
Of course. You're absolutely right.
Unless it's God.
Especially if it's God. No. Especially if it's God.
Okay.
Because, to use the metaphor...
No, my bad.
This is Garden of Eden, right? This is... Why did God really say you couldn't eat the fruit? You will be like God if you do. You see, like that, the desire was always about, wait. Why do you listen to this guy? You could be just like that guy if you took control for yourself. That's always.
Do you think that that's what the line "We don't want no worlds, we want mirrors"
absolutely
is about? Do you think?
Of course it is, man. Uh-huh. I believe in the reality of sin. That's a thing I believe in, and all that I would say that means is that we are flawed intrinsically enough that we are unable to take ourselves out of the pilot seat. We're unable to accept a reality where we're not the main character. And most of our problems stem from that. Stem from the need to be the main character, to need to be the architect of reality, right? Which, by the way, our existentialism is the ultimate how to become the architect of your reality. There is no reality, therefore you alone create it. That's why it's so romantic and interesting. And I think sin is a description of that, but with a moral point of view that comes from an ontological reality that exists outside of our consciousness, right? Meaning a God. Mm-hmm. And if you believe in that, then sin makes a lot of sense, right? Because a God, if that being existed, would have to be the main character. And that's a problem. That's a problem for us. That's a big problem.
Well, I think Stanislaw Lem said, "You write what you know." so he was like, "I'm a god. I'll write."
It's such a fascinating. Like, he's got such fascinating beliefs because, like, he's like, no, I don't want to do this stupid science fiction inquiry, where God's like our best friend or whatever. What if God's a complete alien, unlike human beings anyway? You know who's best to write that? Me, a human. You know what I mean? Like, it's just amazing.
Yeah, it's all we got.
I understand. I don't
here's-
blame him. I just think it's a funny gap he's trying to cross, you know?
It's one of the posits of a lot of sci-fi.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
we got to prove that the world is indifferent. I fall victim to that romance too.
We
all
all
the
do.
time. We talked about Alex Garland. We talked about the Coen brothers. You know, there's a lot to be said about it. And you're right that stories are little propaganda machines. And
that's why we
here's the
love them
thing.
so much.
Here's the thing to me, and what I think gets to the heart of like what I think Soderbergh's version
cool.
is that even if we all the last 30 minutes we answer definitively all the above questions, it seems true, and I love that Soderbergh does this, which is kind of a digression from the other works. It seems that emotions will drive us away from any of those answers, because things like, quote, like being lied to seem to render any other thought experiment
It really
useless.
does.
We just get angry and we do something drastic and we stay on Solaris. We go against our better judgment because we cannot live a lie. Right.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. A
known you said
lie.
It straight up front.
A known lie. I enjoy that.
If certainty of lie, nope. Nope. And I think that's what I think that's kind of a lot of the he kind of does a lot, like I think and this goes to Lem as well. He does a lot of like things to distract you. Like one of the ones that distracts you near the end is the poem by Dylan Thomas. Yeah. It's called, I believe, "And Death Shall Have No Dominion." The gist is basically a poem about lovers dying, but the love persists. Something survives. And I think the movie is trying to say that that's quantifiably memory. And its results are things like grief, but also things like love. I can accept
that. That makes a lot of sense.
And therefore, perception is basically everything. And so if we are told then that your perception, the thing that you thought, that's a lie, that is a absolute betrayal of the very conceit that makes us all human. Do not allow the reality, the lie of reality to convince you. If you allow it to convince you, then you are no longer a part of like this commune.
So this is a tragic tale.
It's a tragic tale about the tragedy of being human, about being powerless.
Oh,
I think that.
Oh,
I think I
like that read.
Oh,
no, for real, I really like that read. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think I don't think that Soderbergh is making a strong enough point to say I think he's sort of like more like laying out that terrain. He's sort of like organizing the feelings along the lines of, you know, would it be like sort of a would you rather this or that?
It all kind of comes down to how you read that ending.
Yeah.
Is the Solaris like deal, is it preferable
is it
to grief
good or
sometimes?
Bad? Right. Is it good or bad?
Does he like it? Here's the thing, he is now a clone. Who are we to ask what's the nature of a clone? At that point, he's skipped the realm of what's human. As Viola Davis said, they're not human. You have to understand that.
That's true.
Because if he doesn't understand that, you are living a lie to me, and that lie cannot stand. It has to be eradicated.
Maybe that's why I like Viola Davis.
And that is what humans. That's what humans do, dude. Our perception, the second it's threatened, it's just like fuck anything else. And I think that's why we viscerally answer questions like the Matrix question, or living with doubt, or is powerlessness comforting, or can powerlessness be comforting? I think all these questions are just dressed up different versions of there are no answers, there are no choices. Could you live with that?
Well, you've done a
Right?
you've done a great job of rendering that question and reading it that way. I think this is a good test case for that. Just to finish a sentence I was saying, I think that's why I like Viola Davis's character in this movie, because she is kind of an idealist and uncompromising, and I respect those people. I think those are interesting people. Whereas George Clooney's a little weak. I mean, let's be honest, right? Like, he's a little bit weak. You know, and I know that's a judgmental word, and maybe it's because I don't have another word that's less judgmental for it. But it does seem like,
I mean, we do see him with his diapers on. I mean, he literally says to a woman who we know, I mean, this is the motivation for why she kills herself. Why would I want a child? Why would I want anything that brings life into this house? Imagine your significant other said that to you.
Right, but let's remember he said it in an angry way, like meaning he wanted the opposite, right? Like he was like, that was a sarcastic question.
Yeah, he was doing it kind of sarcastically. Yeah. But like, imagine they're pinning all of your heartache and all of the problems and fissures into you. You, as Rhea, you are not allowing us to be happy.
Right, you're an obstacle.
You're not bringing life to me. You are an obstacle. That's an unreasonable thing to say.
Of course it is.
I don't know. Maybe.
Of course it is.
Maybe it's not an unreasonable thing to say to any particular person. It's just completely like you have decided to pull the parachute at that point to me.
Really?
And you know he's making a huge mistake and he's reliving that. Oh, yeah. Like if you say that to your significant other, if I was your significant other, I would be like, the fact that you say that, regardless of my fault here, this is over.
Wow, really? You know? I thought that seemed like a intense fight, but it was something they could have come back from.
I don't think I could personally come back from that.
So like that, I think that tells me that Abe is less compromising about the nature of reality than your average lover. You know what I mean? Like,
almost definitely.
That's good. I like that about
almost
you.
Definitely. I don't know. It's just those are literally just words I thought to say when I thought that.
No,
so.
But that's a
get a clinical Clooney.
That's great. I really enjoy. I mean, yeah, I think that Clooney. It's so interesting because he kind of already knows what's coming. Like he's the only person that entered into the situation and knew what was coming. You know, everybody else was surprised by the visitor, right, and had to deal with it. Like when it was like a gut punch, he knew it was coming. Didn't know who, but he knew it was.
Yeah.
But if he'd done any introspection, I think he probably could have figured out who it was going to be. You know,
probably could.
And yet,
it's probably my dad.
I mean, yeah, but it's not like he resisted for 100 years. You know what I mean? He resisted for like 15 minutes.
Just put her out the airlock just the once. Just
That's right.
Once.
Just the once.
It's not like he's tossing all dead Reyes into space.
It's not like,
That's the thing, is she's out there. That's one of my favorite things that Viola Davis also mentions.
Me too.
Like, what do you think's going on with her right now?
Me too.
Just to give a little bit of like horror to him, just to like throw him off. It's almost like it's like sand in the face tactic when they're debating. It's like, what do you think? What do you think you did when you ejected her out to space? You think she's dead right yet? You know, it's just like,
she was a great character. I really by contrast, I really didn't like Jeremy Davies' character much, or the acting.
So that's the snow.
Didn't like it.
Yeah, he's all over the place in every role he does.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's very good. In this, where it's a little bit more grounded, he feels kind of like a caricature because he stops himself in the middle of his sentences. And I mean, I understand that really does express the kind of seriousness of the tone, because there's some of these questions and some of these answers are ineffable, right? There's something that it's like, I don't know what to say. Like, they're too big, and that makes you feel powerless. And so he is kind of caught by his own caveats, his own function of language. He doesn't know what he is. There's so much going on with the character. It's a good character.
I just don't like the acting.
I do think he, I think it was a little bit too much relative to other players in the
just
in
for
the
me.
play.
For me, it wasn't great, but it is his thing. Like, you know, he has a thing. You know, like just like Christopher Walken has a thing. That's his. That's his thing,
I mean,
you know, and it's clearly coming from him, not from it's not like a put on. So I'm not saying that he's bad actor.
No. I would. Yeah. I actually think he's got something that, like, when utilized really correctly, is really powerful. He's been in a lot of good stuff.
I liked his his turn as Charles Manson, actually, and also Saving Private Ryan, obviously. In any case,
I think
can I ask you a question about this? So, like, imagine you encounter this consciousness, right? Like, you're on a ship and you encounter this consciousness. What is your natural, like is that in any way a category blower for you? Like if you're out there and you see Solaris and know that it exists, does that in any way ruin your idea of what reality is?
No.
No, that wouldn't trouble you? I would find that troubling.
That there's a super powerful being
That
in
can
the
manifest
universe?
objects into time and space.
Oh, not at all.
That doesn't bother you.
I think our limited perception doesn't ensure that things like that, magical things, aren't true, but we are magic. There's no denying that humans are magic to me.
Yeah.
Like to an ant, and that's just on our planet, man.
Like,
so imagine what
there,
the cosmos has in store. So like, yeah, it doesn't bother me. I think it's a very scientific belief, in fact, to have faith that there is, most likely, given the probabilities, amazing life out there. But that was an argument. Proof of it, and that
was an argument that George Clooney said that I found. It sort of made me raise my eyebrows. Like that, we're the sort of like mathematical inevitability. That's the thing. I'm like, I don't know if that's true, but it did sort of reinforce his unwillingness to hear anybody but him. You know what I mean? Like, so in that way, I thought it seemed true that he would say it. But, like, they kind of just glossed over it, and then she stopped listening to him, and I was like, I understand why she feels that way.
Yeah, she's like, that's some nonsense.
Yeah.
Don't let that make decisions for you. What do you really feel like? Which I understand that.
I also like the thing that you said, that, like, these arguments sort of always fall by the wayside the minute there's emotions involved. Which is by the way, that's like a David Hume belief, who's like the ultimate sort of. I love Hume. Baby. I do because Hume is extremely rational, like uncompromisingly rational, to a point where you realize, like, oh yeah, that's as far as we can go in some ways. I think he's really good at outlining that. So that's a point he makes, right? Is that like morality is fundamentally emotional and irrational, which is a thing I think is true,
right?
And I also think that's why Lem's inability to connect to that as a writer is why this has been made really well into movies, and why he hates the movies. Like, he fucking hates them. He thinks they're bad. And I'm like, nah, man, they just understood your material better than you did.
Apparently, he signed off on the first version, the made-for-TV version, but I haven't seen it, nor do I care to.
These are both excellent movies. Like, they're really good movies, and it's like, dude, you're too attached to your own ideas here, man.
You're too attached to, dude. Writers, man, writers.
Oh shit, we could tell stories. We could tell some stories.
we could tell some stories. Well, writers could tell better stories, though.
Yeah, that's the fucking problem. They shouldn't get podcasts.
That's the problem. Yeah. Let's not collaborate and be artists together and do the greatest ideas and create the greatest stuff. Let's hate each other because of our
Here's
jobs.
the problem. You and I decided to cross the threshold and become writers one day in 2009, I want to say it was, when we this is like early on in our friendship, like we're like what, 6-month pals at that point, maybe like a year. And we sat down and we're like we got to write a screenplay because there was a school competition. And we basically drank beer and fell asleep and didn't write anything. And then the next morning got up and wrote a 12-page script called Alternative Medicine. We wrote it in what, 3 hours? Right?
It had to be longer than that.
It was pretty quick. And like,
it was mostly on a porch.
Yeah. And I went back and reread it. I don't hate it. I don't hate it that much, Abe. So maybe we don't get to make fun of writers that much. Maybe we don't get to anymore. Because we did it.
Writing.
We did it.
No, I can make fun of myself. It's fine.
I don't hate it that much, Abe. It's dumb, but I don't hate it that much.
I don't hate it that much. Well, I mean, it's all the same stuff, right? We just want to, But this is all very. This is very
like, who cares? Who gives a shit?
But I like talking about it. All of this shit. All of this shit. The philosophical meanderings of two dumbasses. Sure. But I mean, that's where it started. Who the fuck is Stanislav?
I think it's satisfying the request of the movie, which is to, contemplate the nature of memory and meaning, and God and the limits of perception. I think those are big fucking
Those
questions.
are huge themes.
Yeah, but
they're huge ones. That's why this is remakeable.
You could remake it, but I think it really says something that a film of this small size can get that big. You know?
If in fact some of the best questions come from the humblest of films.
Yeah, I love this
because they're allowed to just focus on the one thing as opposed to be, slave to the masters of entertaining heist films. Or
That's
whatever,
right.
You know?
That's right. I mean, again, I know that I love Soderbergh too much, but like his versatility and the effortlessness of his storytelling, he's just very impressive. I continue to be very impressed by him.
Yeah, very impressive. Yeah. He's very good at it. Another guy who understands tone and really.
Like we could have talked a good hour and a half about the montaging in this film, like the way that he just like dips in and out of scenes so seamlessly, and sometimes even not clearly describing what exactly is happening, and yet the emotional content completely clear all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
It's like pretty impressive.
Very good. And I want to thank again Tom.
Thanks, Tom D. Tom. Right?
Good
Tom
suggestion,
D, right?
Tom.
Yeah,
Tom
thanks,
D. Yeah, Tom D. You did some great stuff. I want to do two things. One, I want to find, because I didn't have time to research this right before, but I found literally before we started recording the following trivia on IMDb.
Great.
I'll read it in its entirety. According to Insane Clown Posse, they never received any royalties from the makers of this film for their use of the song Riddlebox. I don't remember an Insane Clown Posse song, but I wish it was the theme.
I like that they're kicking up a stink about it. You know?
Yeah. Oh, of course. I mean, if they didn't give credit to them and they used their song, they are at 100% right. Yeah. I just prefer to think of Steven Soderbergh, famed juggalo. That is what I want to leave this conversation with. Do you not?
Yeah, no. A worthy image to depart our contemplation on.
The other thing is, you asked earlier, like if you were in the situation where you saw Solaris, you saw a big vast ocean that was sentient and powerful. I thought you were going to ask me what I would do, because then we could really get
I was curious what you'd do.
Because what I would do, I'd take a dip, baby.
He goes,
let that sentience go right up my armpits and into my nose.
That water looked very thick, like mucusy. It looked kind of mucusy.
Yeah. Yeah. Let the sentient mucus get all up in all of my
maybe it's like a flubber. Like suddenly you're like bouncing and flying everywhere. Yeah.
Dude. Let's stop this before it gets too erotic.
Flubber is a line for you. Yeah. That's a sensitive spot for
old Abe. Yeah. This is great. Thank you. Yeah. And hopefully that was entertaining. I don't know if philosophical waxing poetic by two dudes is, but
we did our best.
And that was that. And thank you. Subscribe to Small Beans. We're out.
This has been a Small Beans endeavor. We're a bunch of pals who make podcasts, sketches, music, web series, and movies. The Beans always have new ideas percolating, so make sure to check us out at patreon.com/smallbeans. That's patreon.com/smallbeans, where you can browse all of our current and past content, see what we've got planned in the future, and learn how your support can help the small beans grow into huge, giant monster beans. If you enjoyed this content module, please like, rate, subscribe, or tell a friend about us. We love you!